Welcome back. You're watching Trade of the Week. I'm Zinati Guma, and joining me for a tech analysis on African rainbow minerals, Montauk Renewables, Argent Industrial, and Growthpoint is Unum Capital's Loyiso Mpetha. Thank you so much for your time, Loyiso. As always, we're looking at a diversified set of stocks here, looking at industrial steel products company, Argent, also Montauk, a renewable energy gas company, also looking at Growthpoint, a property company, and also African Rainbow Minerals, which is a diversified miner. What are you looking at in terms of how these counters have performed against the broader market?
Yeah, quite a mixed bag of results. Well, actually only one really outperforming, which is Argent, which we can see here in purple. There's been a very, very steady performer over the last 2 years, and we can see over the period under review up 19%. All shares we know has been very, very sluggish, only up 1%. But the other three have been poor performers. We can see here Growthpoint in orange down 28%. And the trend has been fairly downwards, though not as aggressive as the other two. And we can see here African Rainbow Minerals down 30% over this period, but starting to push up a bit. And the worst performer by far has been Montauk Renewables, down 63% over this period. And the trend does still look very strong to the downside. So let's take a look at the beta coefficients and correlations. No surprise, African Rainbow Minerals coming in at a beta coefficient of 1.4, so a very high beta stock, commodity stock, but correlations very low at 0.5. No surprise with Argent almost zero, both in beta and correlation. And we see with Growthpoint and Montauk, both low beta stocks coming in with beta coefficients of 0.7 and 0.9 respectively, but also very, very low correlation to the market. So from a return perspective, all four counters, very, very low correlation to the market, and with a variance in the beta coefficients. So no real surprises there.
Yeah, it's quite interesting seeing there that Argent has been the clear outperformer there. Of course, a small cap. So it maybe kind of points to the fact that maybe there are some opportunities that we're missing in that small cap space, but also Montauk Renewables, because I think they had an incredible year in 2022, particularly with the skyrocketing gas prices after Russia invaded Ukraine. So of course that has come off. Let's take a look at ARM and the technicals and what they're pointing to there.
Yeah, ARM is a very interesting one, and it's actually the first time we taking a look at it. So I'm going to take a bit more time on it. You can see listed back in 2003. You can see how volatile and wild the swings are between peaks and troughs. The sell-offs are very, very aggressive. So looking at it from a general trend perspective and from an Elliott wave perspective, one thing that came to mind is there's a very, very strong area of resistance between 307 Rand a share and say 320. So we can see the stock has touched this resistance zone about 4 times, and every time it just sells off. And from an Elliott wave perspective, besides this very, very clear ABC zigzag pattern, it's very difficult to label this advance from 2016. Though if I had to force things, I would label it as a leading diagonal, but at this point I don't think it's important. What we need to focus on is whether or not this level here at 146.62 presents buying opportunities. And just to emphasize how wild this stock is, you can see in terms of percentage change and points change, how dramatic the sell-offs tend to be. And besides this one strong rally, which we saw in March 2020 when there was a big commodity boom, I mean, it was pretty much an everything bull market in 2020. The bull cycles tend to be a bit more choppy compared to the very, very accelerated sell-offs. So that's the one thing I've sort of picked up with this stock in terms of trend dynamics. The sell-offs are very aggressive. But the rallies or bull markets tend to be a bit choppy and providing opportunities within the pullbacks. So And when you look at this most recent sell-off from January 2023, so last year, it's the third largest of all these sell-offs. So this is quite a significant sell-off. You can see down 54% from this all-time high. So the question really is a bottom in at 146.62, and are we going to see a continuation to the upside? So zooming in on the stock, and what I'm looking at here, I think there's a bit of reason to be positive. So from a wave perspective, I'm looking at this advance as wave one. We have a clear three-wave pullback, which terminates above this low at 146.62. And looking at this advance most recently, it does look impulsive in nature. So if you do have a medium to long-term and perspective and you're patient, I think there's a case to be made that a bottom could potentially be in at 146.62. So looking at the historical trends, the nature of the trend, I'm more bullish on African rainbow minerals. As long as price holds above 146.62, I'm maintaining a bullish outlook.
I know it's a diversified miner, but you mentioned also that the sell-offs are quite aggressive, and particularly this last one. Do you think that it's maybe because it has exposure to these ones that have really been beaten down, for example, PGMs and coal?
Yeah, I think, sometimes even as a diversified miner, there's one thing you cannot diversify from, which is it's still commodities, and commodities are still very volatile and cyclical. So,
and you're dealing with Transnet.
Yeah, and Transnet as well. So you get pockets of good performance, such as in the iron ore industry, which then gets totally neutralized by the manganese. And we know the PGMs have been depressed for a very long time, as well as coal now has come off and has been depressed. And it's very hard to see catalysts in those PGM and coal commodities in terms of the prices. So you're probably banking more on the iron ore business picking up, and also being a commodity stock and just its sheer nature of being cyclical. So the fundamentals are not really supportive of the technical outlook, but hey, it's a commodity stock. Anything can happen.
Exactly. Well, let's go into a stock that not a lot of people really look at, Montauk Renewables. I don't know if it's people don't understand it, or it's because they don't have operations in South Africa. They're based in the US, and even just the ownership structure has been very interesting to watch, because this counter has been around for decades. Montauk Renewables, what story is
so it's not a company that I normally look at, but actually, funny enough, over the weekend I was watching a documentary on Enron, one of the most famous bankruptcies of all time. And one thing that was very interesting about Enron and its downfall was its trading of electricity. So in the US, electricity can actually be traded as a normal stock.
Okay.
Now imagine if Eskom were to try to do that, it would be absolute disaster. So I was fascinated by the trading of electricity and how the pricing works. And in my research, I came across Montauk as actually been one of the primary generators of renewable electricity, not just electricity of the grid, but renewable electricity as part of the renewable or over and above the renewable natural gas. So that's what actually intrigued me to take a look at Montauk. So let's see what happened here. Again, like you said, there was that period of strong performance when natural gas prices shot up. And what we've seen from September 2022 has been a very, very strong sell-off. Now, the question is, as much as the downtrend is still intact, am I seeing any signs of a potential bottom looming? And we can say that the stock has recently made a new all-time low at 61.20. So looking at this from an earlier wave perspective, I'm seeing this first sell-off as wave A, a bit of a pullback for wave B, and the sell-off for wave C seems to have completed the first three waves. So I'm looking at a potential bounce, which I'll label as wave 4, and then forecast one more sell-off for wave 5. So at this current juncture, there's really not much to be bullish on. But if we do see this pattern play out, I think we are closer to a bottom than say, forecasting further downside on Montauk. So again, not yet bullish, but I'm saying that the downtrend seems to be at a very, very mature stage.
Do you think also this is kind of emphasizing that a company can be different to its stock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say that a company is one thing and the stock is,
is another thing.
Something else. And again, you have to take into account that the company operates in what I call the real economy. The stock operates in the paper economy.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can have one stock being, say, defensive in terms of its business, but when it comes to the stock, it comes to consumers and
unloved.
And, you know, so there's a lot of difference between the company and itself in the real economy and the stock in the paper economy. Huge differences. And I always emphasize that point.
The financial markets are really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go to Argent. Of course, you said that it is the outperformer there as you looked at the companies compared to the broader market. Small cap there. Just take us through the technical picture.
Yeah, often overlooked company. I don't see much research done on it, but looking at one of the best performers over the last 2 years certainly caught my attention. So again, like most stocks, has its period of turmoil. We can see an 8-year bear market from 2007, which bottomed in November 2015. But when I apply the Elliott wave principle to this advance from November 2015, I see a very, very clear impulsive advance. Had wave 1, wave 2, and you see this wave 2 terminated above this low at 3 Rand 2 cents. And what we've seen now is further advance in wave 1, 2, 3, 4. And I believe that this current advance is another 5-wave advance to complete the 5th wave of the 3rd wave. And from here, I'm forecasting a pullback to wave 4 and further advance for wave 5. So I think in the medium term, there's a high probability that Argent Industrial will make new all-time highs. So from a technical perspective, looking very, very good. So I think this is one of the best picks for the year going forward. I think there's still momentum in the stock and the fundamentals are also very supportive.
We're talking about best picks. Usually Growthpoint is seen as one of the best property companies, REITs on the JSE because of its diversified nature. And of course you have that crown jewel, which is the V&A waterfront. What do the technicals look like? Because I mean, you kind of get a mixed bag every time they release results.
Yeah, so we did a recap last year in November on Growthpoint, and the main focus was looking at this sell-off from 3150, which I had labeled as an impulse. We had this very long or prolonged sideways movement in the triangle, and then there was this sell-off. But back then, I said I'm not confident yet that this is the bottom, as we could see further sell-off. But again, when a stock is in the 5th wave, I always say we are closer to a bottom than we are to more prolonged sell-off. So that was the outlook back then. So what has transpired since, we can see this advance from last year continued a bit further up to 1218, and now the stock has pulled back. So I'm going to put my neck on the line on this one and say there's a higher probability that a bottom is in at 9 Rand 14. But if the stock does push down below 914, then it will obviously invalidate it. But I will still maintain a more bullish outlook as opposed to a prolonged sell-off. So looking at it where price is currently and my preferred outlook, I'm looking at this as wave 1, wave 2, and again, very critical that wave 2 terminates above 914, and I'm looking for further advance for wave 3. So for conservative investors or traders, I think a break above 1218 will give more conviction that a bottom indeed is in place at 914. And again, like you mentioned, from a fundamental perspective, it tends to be a mixed bag. I think there's two primary headwinds that Growthpoint is contending with now, which is the upward trajectory in its loan to value because of its property valuation sort of slumping a bit. And we know we've been in this high interest rate environment, which obviously hurts the distributable income. But I think the stock has weathered the storm very well over the last year or so. So the key level to watch is that 9.14 Rand.
All right. Well, let's get to the educational segment for today. You're talking about a channeling technique.
Yeah.
What is that? Okay,
so a very interesting technique that we use as Elioticians, and I'll use Montauk as an example. So we have this pattern which we call the zigzag ABC, which is a three-wave pattern. And what we do is we project a channel from the peak and link it to the peak of wave B and then extend it downwards. And then we project a parallel trend line starting from the termination of wave A, also extended downwards. So under normal circumstances, you would forecast that the C wave will terminate at or around the lower support channel. But in this case, which is very interesting, I'm not expecting that, because if that were to happen, then the stock price would probably terminate below zero, which we know it can't happen. So that is how we would normally forecast a downside projection, but also as another guideline to give us conviction that a bottom is probably in, and we can look for more upside, is if the stock breaks above the resistance of the upper trend line. So what channeling does is it gives us dynamic support and resistance, but in a descending or ascending manner, as opposed to the traditional horizontal support and resistance. So it's just another fancy support and resistance, really.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and giving us those insights and the technical picture for those stocks, Loyiso. That was Unum Capital's Loyiso Mpetha with this week's Trade of the Week.